often talk about the challenges that we face, but take heart. We're making some tremendous progress in very critical areas. Thanks to you and Economic War Room, we're gathered together and addressing critical issues, and we're making progress. There's 4 I want to share with you today. First, Chinese economic warfare has been exposed. Second, this deep state rats in the intelligence community, they've been outed. Third, President Trump is addressing the Thrift Savings Plan, something we've talked about in multiple episodes. We're winning that one. And fourth, there is a new grid executive order from the White House that will help protect our electric grid. Let's start with the first one. Chinese economic warfare is now recognized. I've covered this for at least a decade, and we've covered it in multiple episodes of the Economic War Room, starting one of the most significant ones was episode 23, which was titled China's Growing Threat. But now, the German intelligence agency is, yes, China and the World Health Organization conspired to keep the world unaware of the threat of this coronavirus. The 5 eyes of the intelligence community, these are our allies. That's Australia, Canada, New Zealand, the United States, and the United Kingdom. They're all recognizing uniformly that China is a threat. And our Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo, who is a former CIA director and a former congressman, he was recently interviewed and he knew exactly where the origin of this virus was. Let's watch what he had to say about it in a recent interview.
And Mr. Secretary, have you seen anything that gives you high confidence that it originated in that Wuhan lab?
Martha, there's enormous evidence that that's where this began. We've said from the beginning that this was a virus that originated in Wuhan, China. We took a lot of grief for that from the outset, but I think the whole world can see now. Remember, China has a history of infecting the world, and they have a history of running substandard laboratories. These are not the first times that we've had a world exposed to viruses as a result of failures in a Chinese lab. And so while the intelligence community continues to do its work, they should continue to do that and verify so that we are certain. I can tell you that there is a significant amount of evidence that this came from that laboratory in Wuhan.
What this means is we have been lied to. You knew that. You knew it if you watched this program, or if you're just paying any attention at all, you knew it. We've been lied to. But finally, we're recognizing that it was an act of warfare to let the Chinese coronavirus slip out of the country as they did. I mean, things like where they stopped flights from going from Wuhan to other major cities in China, but allowed them to go into Milan and New York City and around the world. Seriously? Or when they took all of the personal protection equipment, the PPE. I've got friends who had bought masks in China that had been produced by American companies in China, and they bought those masks and they were ready to be shipped here, and they got scooped up, taken away by the Chinese Communist government. They knew what was going to take place, and they gathered all of the protection equipment for their own use. There's a study that says that if they'd been honest with the world at the beginning of this coronavirus, that 95% of the cases would have been prevented. And I think that means 95% of the lives would have been saved that were lost. This indicts not just China, but also their patsy, the World Health Organization, the one that we provided most of the funding to, but they were serving the Chinese masters at the time. Now, why do I consider this progress? Well, if you look at any 12-step program, step number 1 is recognize you have a problem. And finally, we're recognizing the problem that we have with our supply chains being locked into China. Good news, supply chains are being brought home. We recognize that in the pharmaceutical area, where we did a China RX show with Rosemary Gibson, we recognize we can't manufacture all of our drugs in China anymore, not all of our vitamin C, or not Cipro, or all of the important things that we need, penicillin, just to keep our hospitals operating. That can't be dependent on China, and we get it. We're now moving to a war footing. This is not just business. You know, people say, oh, it's just business with China, I'm just making a profit. No, it's not. It's a war. It's an economic war. Let's take a look at what President Trump recently said when he acknowledged that this was a worse attack on America than 9/11 or Pearl Harbor even. This is from a recent press conference. Take a look.
This is really the worst attack we've ever had. This is worse than Pearl Harbor. This is worse than the World Trade Center. There's never been an attack like this. And it should have never happened. Could have been stopped at the source. Could have been stopped in China. It should have been stopped right at the source.
Okay, so that's great news. We finally woke up to the China threat. That's the enemy outside the United States. But we also have tremendous progress recognizing the enemy inside the United States as well. You may have read recently, Lieutenant General Mike Flynn has been exonerated. At least the Justice Department dropped all charges against him. And they should have. They had set him up. The FBI had purposely set him up in an entrapment. This is a patriotic man, and a man that I worked with when he was at the Defense Intelligence Agency. For example, I wrote a blog in May of 2013. It was globaleconomicwarfare.com, and the title was, "It's All About the Economy." One of the readers of that blog was the head of the DIA, yes, Lieutenant General Mike Flynn. He read it, and I got a phone call, would you come to the DIA headquarters in Washington, and would you talk to our analysts about how it is really, truly an economic war with China? You know, this shouldn't have been news to them, but it was. Why? Because inside the Defense Intelligence Agency, their China expert was someone that had been mentored by a man convicted of spying for China. And he was so clear and so condescending with me when he said, oh, no reputable China expert believes we're in an economic war, and that's really not true and all this. And so I listed some that I knew. I said, well, how about Gordon Chang? Oh, well, Gordon Chang. Well, other than him, but not Gordon Chang. And then I said, well, how about Mike Pillsbury, who later wrote the book, The 100-Year Marathon? Well, Pillsbury's another one. How about Andy Marshall in the Office of Net Assessment inside the Pentagon? Oh, he dismissed him too. I'm like, General Flynn, why did you call me in to lecture at the Defense Intelligence Agency headquarters? Why a money manager from Texas? Why would you want me? He said, because those people in the DIA are hearing primarily from a pro-China perspective, and I want them to have another perspective as well. I cheered for General Flynn after that. When he had me in and speaking, I had to go up against the head of the Carnegie Institute for World Peace or something like that, who debated me, and the number 2 guy at the World Bank, and it was the 2 of them on me, and I said, we're in an economic war. They said, no, we're not. Well, guess what? We're recognizing we're in an economic war, and General Flynn was part of that. He was trying to wake up the government to the reality of it. So I cheered when General Flynn was named the National Security Advisor to the President of the United States. When President Trump said, I want you, Mike Flynn, as my National Security Advisor, I was thrilled because I knew he understood economic warfare. I also sat in horror and watched as the deep state took him out. I knew that that's what they were doing. I knew it at the time. I even wrote about it in another blog. So I'm going to read to you what I wrote in February 16th, 2017. It says, there are a lot of stories about the resignation of the National Security Advisor, Lieutenant General Flynn. Many of them are purposely misleading. The real story is how General Flynn was attacked by elements in the intelligence community, the IC, and the deep state. He was taken down for several reasons. General Flynn was prepared to address the Muslim Brotherhood threat. General Flynn was a hawk on Iran and thus a threat to the Obama-Iran deal. General Flynn was a takedown target to discredit the Trump administration. And I'll add one more. General Flynn asked me to speak at the DIA about the China threat. He had clear eyes. Going on, it says, the thing we should care about, however, is that the process that took him down was clearly illegal, and the leaks are a threat to national security. The fact that the intelligence community, which is supposed to serve the president, could go after the administration is more than frightening. Even Dennis Kucinich, a known leftist Democrat, understands this. We cannot allow elitists to use our national security apparatus to override the will of the American voters. Well, it took several years, 3 years plus. But finally, the truth is out. Now, how did I know that's what was taking place? Well, I worked with the Obama intelligence community. I knew exactly how corrupt they could be, and I knew that they had threatened to put me in jail and make people disappear. That's what they said. They said, if you talk about the research you've done, we could put you in jail or we could make you disappear. That's a direct threat. It took a former director of the CIA to get me out of trouble by working with 2 different senators. I also knew the character of Lieutenant General Flynn. So when the Justice Department dropped the charges, it was no surprise to me. It was clear from the FBI documents that the whole thing was a setup, and this is a big win for justice. Hopefully, the deep staters will be outed and they will face their own justice. That's the second big win. The third win is President Trump has recognized the threat of the Thrift Savings Plan attempting to put our pension money in Chinese stocks. If you're a regular viewer of this program, you've seen we've done multiple episodes on this with Roger Robinson and Kyle Bass. We also featured it in a special episode, episode number 65. You should go back and watch that. That featured Alan West as our host, Kyle Bass, who is one of the top investors in the world, Roger Robinson, the guy that led economic warfare strategy for the Reagan administration, and a group of patriotic veterans who were told that their investments in the Thrift Savings Plan were soon to be funding Chinese companies that were producing weapons aimed at our United States. This is a bad idea from the start. Who ever imagined that we should be funding a communist nation in doing whatever they want to do? And there was no accounting standards being applied. They were just going to stick the money in without them meeting American accounting standards, without them promising to support human rights, without them promising not to build weapons against us. We were giving them money to do all 3 of those horrible things. Here's the good news. President Trump has ordered these investments pulled. Here's a Fox Business story I'll quote. President Trump is moving to cut investment ties between U.S. federal retirement funds and Chinese equities. Fox Business has learned in a move that is tied to the handling of COVID-19. In the first letter written Monday, obtained exclusively by Fox Business, National Security Advisor Robert O'Brien and National Economic Council Chair Larry Kudlow write to U.S. Labor Secretary Eugene Scalia stating that the White House does not want the Thrift Savings Plan, which is a federal employee retirement fund, to have money invested in Chinese equities. This is a huge win for us. In fact, I was on the phone with good friends Steve Bannon and Frank Gaffney when this news announcement was coming out. Why would we ever put our pension money from soldiers and veterans into Chinese companies that violate human rights, are sanctioned by our government, steal intellectual property, or make weapons aimed at our active duty military? That's insane. Good news, President Trump was alerted to it and he immediately put a stop to it. And I believe that if we keep the pressure on, there may be pushback. The investment people on Wall Street will fight back, no question. But President Trump is strong, and if we keep pushing, we will guarantee that there is no forced investment into China. So we need to keep the pressure on. YouTube and our XOTV page have our full show on this. You should share it. Also share our free battle plan on the Thrift Savings Plan. Now, our fourth win is also huge. President Trump has signed a new executive order to protect our electric grid. That's right. The President of the United States recognizes another problem, and that is that China could hack and take down our grid, or others could attack our grid, and so he signed a new executive order. We've covered this in episodes 22 and 35. And our friend Tommy Waller wrote about this progress in the Epoch Times, and I want to read you some of Tommy's article. He said, President Trump has issued an unprecedented executive order on May 1st, taking significant and long overdue steps to remedy what the order described as a national emergency with respect to the threat to the United States bulk power system. You know what that is? That's the transformers that allow the grid to continue to operate. That's the most vulnerable part of our grid, and he signed an executive order to protect it. The EO, executive order, identifies the grave threat to America's electric grid from malicious foreign actors through supply chain vulnerabilities and cyber threats, where outsourcing foreign parts and software leave the grid vulnerable to espionage and sabotage. Translation to me, he knows that China is a serious threat to our electric grid, and he's putting a stop to it. Again, this is huge news and great progress. We're finally recognizing who the enemy is, both foreign and domestic, and we're taking action. Now, there are battle plans for each of the episodes that we've mentioned. They're available at economicwarroom.com. Just sign up, register, and you can download all our battle plans. But in particular, look for episodes 22, 23, 35, and 65. This is enormous progress, and you're making a difference. You can help further. You can be the small ships that help carry this message. You know, we talk about Dunkirk. You can be one of those small ships making a real difference. Share our battle plans. Share this program with people so they can see there's reason for hope. We have a president that's taking action, and it's because of you. You have gotten the word out. Spread the word. Please help us continue doing that. Go to economicwarroom.com. Send friends there, send business associates, and tell them that they should sign up for the show. They can use the code word ECON. Click on the link, use the code word ECON, and get a huge discount in this program on Blaze TV. And then you get to see all the other hosts like Glenn Beck, and you get to see Mark Levin and Steven Crowder and Phil Robertson and Steve Deese and Ali Beth Stuckey and others. And Candace Owens is now on the Blaze. So you get all of that in one subscription, and you can help us make a very real difference in saving America. Now remember, what we see as a marketplace, our enemies view as a battle space. This is Kevin Freeman from the Economic War Room.